Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, presented by Zwift, the online cycling platform that makes training fun. More on them and Paris-Roubaix in a minute. Paris-Roubaix preview men and women's edition. It's a bit later compared to the other monument previews, Flanders and San Remo. The reason for that is I refuse to be burned a third time. Fool me once, fool me twice, I was an idiot, and now I'm not going to be an idiot the third time. Now time for the women's Paris-Roubaix Femmes avec Zwift preview. 125 kilometres from Denain, where there was the GP Denain cobbled race, same part of the world, which Roglic did the other week, to Roubaix. They do not do the Trois d'Amberg, Have-Louis-Wallès section. They start at the Ronan-Avondigny cobbled sectors. They do the same finale though. Mons-en-Pavel, Carrefour de l'Arbre, Canfin-en-Pavel, the Orchy sectors, and then obviously in the velodrome at Roubaix. 125 Ks, as I said, so about 3 hours, give or take. Apparently we have more live coverage this year, which is great to see, and also obviously fantastic to see Zwift partnering as the title sponsor of the race. But they're also this year the title sponsor of the Tour de France Femmes for the next 4 years. On Saturday for the Paris-Roubaix Femmes avec Zwift, it marks 100 days until the start of the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, and Zwift are calling on, and we are as well, evidently, calling on fans to watch the Femmes race as the women's peloton takes on the TDF for the first time in decades. For more information on how Zwift are working to grow a stronger and more inclusive community, or to dive in and start riding with a free 7-day trial, head to Zwift.com through the link in the description down below. I can't wait for that Tour de France Femmes race, particularly the Chemin Blanc or whatever, the White Road stage. But more on that in due course. No Lizzie Deignan, controversial Lizzie Deignan on the start list, Benji.
Yeah, certainly.
She won last year solo in the wet. I don't think the race will be the same as last year. I think, again, like the men's, I think it'll be much more controlled, at least for the first part.
I agree in that aspect. In mind that it was somewhat expected that an early move could have an opportunity more than a later move, because the logic is simple. Going ahead means that you're not in the group behind, and the group behind is going to thin out because of the crashes on the wet cobbles and so forth, and domestiques are going to be lost in the process. And the less domestiques in the chase, the better the chances that the breakaway makes it, or the riders that ride away beforehand make it. And definitely if you've got a gap that Deignan was able to create relatively quickly. Now, she was one of the stronger riders in the race. I won't deny that. 100% she was. But she was mostly clever in applying a tactic that brought her in front when the peloton was being devastated by crashes on the wet cobble sections. And now with the dry Roubaix, which is the likely foreshadowing of the weather at the moment, means that it's likely going to be a bit like we saw the pattern in men's races in the past, where dry Roubaix are a larger peloton and not necessarily as decisive early on. Now, that doesn't mean an early move cannot happen, because the race is quite shorter than the men's race. So, therefore, I don't know. But I think the breakaways are not really given that much usually when it comes to women's races recently. We looked at Brabant's women's race last week, and to be honest, like the early breakaway, there was none for 70 kilometers at the start of the race. So I don't necessarily see a group getting away in the same fashion and getting a bit of a gap. So if someone wants to ride away early, it needs to be happening on the cobble sections already, I dare to say, to get an advantage there. And that's where I look at these teams that are outnumbering others, the stronger teams on the start list, to have an advantage. Being able to send riders forward without hurting their favorites in the process, without having to spend their favorites by attacking.
The big favourites for this race are Lotte Kopecky on SD Works. There's no Van Vleuten here. She crashed here last year. She's not participating for Movistar. Their top rider is the Dane Emma Norsgaard, who, she is a big option for this race. Of course, Marianne Vos, who was second last year, just could not catch Deignan. She was the strongest from the, peloton. She's Jumbo business leader and has reinforcements with Labecki, and Tointje Baekhuis was good for Jumbo last year. Trek, might even be as strong as SD Works. Van Dijk, Lucinda Brand, Longo Borghini, Balsamo, Cordon Rigaud, who was quite good last year, Loretta Hansen and Hosking, Bastien Elise, the sprint option, who's been great for UAE. I think she top 10 last year. No Chapman for FDJ. She and I think Uttrup Ludwig have been unwell, and so it's Cavalli who won Amstel and Grace Brown. Amelia Farland's also a big engine. Cromwell, Barnes, Shabby, Klein, Roy, Nuvia Doma for Canyon Schramm is actually quite good, but no one there is I think a top favourite for this race. How do you think SD Works play at Benji? Open race, flowing numbers, or all for Kopecky?
I'd say Kopecky as main leader, but an open race next to that. Like, again, Vollering is not at the start for this team. They don't have a Reuser at the start either on paper yet, because, again, those start lists are not 100% confirmed yet. But if the team is indeed Kopecky, Vandenbroek, Blaak, and Majerus, I see that as Majerus and Blaak being riders that can get ahead, while Kopecky is the sprinty option behind, which is a very intriguing strategy to what I said earlier. Like, riders that can go early without hurting the fact that you've still got Kopecky behind if that attack does not work. And therefore, I see Majerus as a perfect option to try and get away somewhat early. She was very strong last year. I think she got a top 10, if I recall correctly, in this race last year. 11th, okay, I was wrong. Sorry. I'm very sorry, apologies. It's one spot difference, but you know what I mean. It's a very good performance. And I see her as one of the stronger riders on cobbles as well in the peloton, so that option works. And she might not be marked as much as a Kopecky and a Vandenbroek Blaak, for example. And I think Blaak is then the option you have in the later phase, where if a group of 10 is ahead with Kopecky, Blaak, and other riders from other teams, Blaak is the rider that can roll attacks, while Kopecky can play that defensive role. Or, if there's no other sprinters in the group, Blaak can just keep on pacing the group. So it's intriguing, but I think their numerical advantage can play a lot into this race. But I think there's other teams that also have that. I think Lonneke Uniken is one of the riders that was great at healthy aging to last year. And then next to that, I think was good at, was it Brugge de Panne this year when it comes to her sprint? I do expect her to fall into a domestique role here. What do you expect of the squad?
I think they'll ride for Kopecky, but they still want to drop Balsamo and Norsgaard. It's much, if they go to a sprint with Kopecky against pretty much anyone except those two, they're going to be the heavy favourites to win. So they need to attack with riders and force other riders to chase, and then re-attack with Kopecky and get numbers in groups, like basically Quickstep with Bonin back in peak Quickstep Bonin years. I think they try and do the same thing. I do think Balsamo, I think maybe her first or second race last year after winning the World Champs was in the Rainbow Bands here in Paris-Roubaix Femmes avec Zwift. She crashed in the wet. She still finished like 57th. I think a dry edition, she can win. I think Balsamo is really good, and SD Works need to basically plan accordingly that we need to make this race really open, because she has been in just ridiculous form, Balsamo, and they have a strong team. Brand, favourite in her own right, Van Dijk, Longo Borghini. Norsgaard, I don't really see how she wins, Benji, because if the race is set up in such a way that she can win, then Balsamo should be there. How could she be in a group with no Balsamo unless Balsamo's crashed?
I rate Norsgaard a slight bit higher than Balsamo when it comes to on-flat cobble sections. I feel like she's more of a power person when it comes to on the cobbles, being able to push that for a longer amount of time and therefore punish the sprinty types. And I think Balsamo might be slightly less in that aspect. That's just my opinion based on the races we've seen. And then I look at Kopecky versus the likes of a Norsgaard if it comes to a sprint between those two. And I'd argue it's closer than we probably would dare to think, because I think last year in Lotto Thüringen Tour, Norsgaard was dominating quite well and Kopecky came later on. I think they both beat each other last year during certain races. So if those two go to a sprint, I don't necessarily think I know who to pick, although I'd probably pick Kopecky a slight bit higher. But you're right, if Balsamo's still in the wheel, then it's Balsamo. Depends. After a harder race, we don't know.
There's no Lisa Brennauer here. Unfortunately, she's had COVID. She was one of the big favourites last year and probably would have been this year. Suits her really well on Sarah Tissett WNT Pro Cycling. So, yeah, that's unfortunate for her. They have Confolonieri, who has been quite good this season, so that's their option. DSM have no Franziska Koch on the start list on PCS at the time of recording. She came top 10, probably the biggest surprising name to be on that in the top 10 last year. But my hot take to win this is Pfeiffer Georgie on DSM.
Ooh.
I think she can win from a small group sprint, like of 3 riders. I think she's really good. Showed the British national champs on that was a cobbled climb, but that was in wet conditions. I think she's a serious cobbled rider, and I think Roubaix suits her more. I don't think she has maybe the acceleration to follow like a Kopecky attack on a cobbled climb, but Roubaix gets ahead of the race because I don't think Vivas can win. I think it's too hard. Maybe that's wrong, but yeah, I like Pfeiffer Georgie.
Why have we not spoken about Marianne Vos as amazingly as we would in previous years? Is that because we feel like her preseason has not been that great, knowing she only did 3 races and actually did pretty well in 2 of the 3?
So yeah, how's she done? Gen Wevelgem is like huge peloton, and she lost the sprint to Balsamo. So that's fine. She's not expected to win that. Strada Bianca, she looked a bit off, and she got dropped by a lot of riders, 7th. Still not the worst, and not that indicative of how you go in Roubaix. I think it's the Flanders result, Benji. Like 20th. Maybe she just didn't bother sprinting for 10th. Bastianelli, she was in the same group as Bastianelli, who sprinted for 10th, a minute 10 behind. I don't know. Maybe you're right. I think she should be the favorite. Actually, I just hadn't got round to it, and she's who I was going to pick because she still has the handling, cyclocross legend. Yeah, I think. I don't know. Why is it? Is it just because she hasn't raced?
I think that's the case. She hasn't raced that much, and therefore we haven't seen her too much. And I actually don't know the reason behind her not racing that much. I think she focused on the cyclocross in the initial part of the season and perhaps is slowly building up, or perhaps she had an illness somewhere that we don't know about. So, yeah, I think I do expect quite a bit from her, and especially that cyclocross background helped her a lot last year, as she got that solid result of 2nd last year. And when we think about the team of Jumbo last year, was one of the teams that was mostly represented towards the end. Like between couple sections, that was the team that kept pacing that 20 women group behind Dagen every single time. Between every couple section, riders like Teuntje Beekhuis and Romy Casper were there to work for the likes of Marianne Vos. Yes, that team is not the deepest in there, but they were there. And I do think their team is sometimes stronger than people expect. Jan Mark is also a pretty strong rider in that aspect. Now, I do want to mention, we've spoken about CX riders in the form of Marianne Vos, but we haven't spoken much about Lucinda Brand, where I think last year she skipped Roubaix as one of the riders that was named a lot for that race. And she ended up doing the cyclocross races at that period instead. But she was one of the names that we mentioned a lot, even in our preview last year. If she was going to do it, we would have seen a good result, I think. So I think this is the one race in the season where I'm like, Lucinda Brand, okay, this is a name that really fits on this parcours. And obviously, in that team of Trek, you've also got Ella van Dijk, who is one of the favorites for this race on paper directly.
That's why I said, and I think it's possible Trek Segafredo was stronger than SD Works. Brand versus Vandenbroek Black. Brand could be stronger. Van Dijk against Majoris. Van Dijk can be stronger. Longoborghini and Cecchini. ELB, Cordon Rigaud and Fournier. It's very possible they have the strongest overall team, and they have probably the fastest rider, assuming Vivas doesn't make it to the finish. So, yeah, I think they should. But that's the thing. If they have an open and aggressive race with those riders, then Balsamo is less likely to win. But Brand can win solo. Van Dijk can win solo. So can ELB. But yeah, Trek, I think, might be the strongest team in the race. Movistar, I'm circling back to them, Benji. They're not bringing Sierra, at least according to PCS. I'm kind of surprised by that. Sierra 4th at Flanders. I think, why not?
I think she's more fitting towards everything that includes spongy hills, and that might be the reason that her focus is also on the likes of an LBL and also on the likes of a Flesh and so forth. And we saw it at Amstel recently. And keeping that all in mind, I think Roubaix might be skipped as a consequence of that, where her skills lie in the punchy type and not necessarily in the flat cobble type. That's at least what I base this on. But I actually don't remember if she rode Roubaix last year at her,
She
what is it?
didn't.
Astana Monix, whatever it was called, Iron Monix. Yeah, she didn't, you're right. But I just don't see Roubaix as much as I see every race that has hills for her.
So it's still probably going to be the big teams, Trek, Jumbo-Visma, SD Works duking it out. Former Vos, I'm reluctant to ever doubt her. She is my pick to win this race, Marianne Vos, with Pfeiffer Georgie being my dark horse. Now, maybe there's no betting odds that I can see for this race, so maybe Pfeiffer Georgie would have been the fifth favourite. I don't think that would be the case. And book Marta Bastianelli, top 10, put your life on it. I reckon top 10 is a lock. What's your view for this race, Benji?
I think that when it comes to this race, I see the likes of Lucinda Brand, the likes of Majerus or Lonneke Uniken, riders like that forming a earlier move that might get relatively far into the final if the peloton doesn't watch out. And then I look at the team of Jumbo Visma and I'm like, okay, I don't think they can control a group like that getting away too easily. So if there's too many dangerous riders in a group like that, that's going to be very intriguing to see where that can land. But I think my winner for this, Jesus Christ, I'm always so bad at like choosing the actual winner at the end of these podcasts, but I'm going to go ahead and choose the likes of an not Lucinda Brandt. No, not Lucinda Brandt. I'll go with Lotte Kopecky. Yeah, I'll stay true to my Belgian heart so that I don't get deported because of my previous choices of not picking Wout van Aert for men's Roubaix. So that way I get the Belgian citizens on my side again, and I think we can all be happy about that. Lotte Kopecky wins in a reduced group sprint in the velodrome and therefore becomes one of the best riders when it comes to the classics this year, 100% after winning RVV and Strade Bianche. I see that ahead of me. When it comes to outsiders, I don't know. We've got a pretty large following when it comes to Germans for the podcast, so I'd love to say that I want to see Mieke Kröger get into a group and do something crazy, Taco van der Hoorn style. So yeah, outsider Mieke Kröger, why not?
She's got a big engine. It's certainly possible if she gets in a breakaway early. I'm just seeing that I'm not sure if the DSM women's team are also using that tire pressure device. But yeah, Kudler and Avivas, she's able to adjust her tire pressure, bumps it up to 85 psi, 90 psi for the velodrome, and does a supercharged sprint and laps everybody. I'm not sure if that's how that tire pressure management thing works. But yeah, keen to see how that works if it is used in the women's race. Should be a great addition. The prize money has been boosted as well, according to Velo News from O'Shea. Her article says that it's boosted to €50,000 for the second edition, which is a huge increase. Whether Zwift has anything to do with that, I'm sure it doesn't hurt that Zwift is now the title sponsor of Paris-Roubaix Femmes avec Zwift. More coverage. Everything seems to be moving in the right direction. So I can't wait to see the first ever dry edition of Paris-Roubaix Femmes avec Zwift. I can't wait to see it to compare to last year because we think very strongly that last year the wet edition, as you saw in the men's to previous historical editions, was an anomaly, and that increases the excitement for me this year for the women's race because I'm like, maybe Vibas can win this in the dry. I don't know. I don't think she can, but we don't know yet. So that's why I'm really excited for this weekend. Any last thoughts, Benji?
Very much looking forward to it. Same thoughts. I want to see the race dynamics on Saturday and Sunday to see whether it plays out similarly to what we expect. And I just hope that we've got a very good race. I want it to open up early, but I don't want the race to be decided early. I want to have tension until the last moment, kind of like, what was it, Roubaix 2016? The one that Bonin got second and got destroyed by that villainous character called Matthew Heyman. that was a very good Roubaix because the tension was there. The last 2 kilometers were probably the most stressful last 2 kilometers of my entire life of watching cycling. And I want it to happen in both the men's race and the women's race. I want entertainment and stuff around that. I would find it funny if that DSM management system for their tires fails for a few riders, because that would be, it would be good content. But on the other end, if it works and it's innovative, that would be pretty cool as well. But all in all, we're looking forward to this weekend. I certainly am, and I hope we've got some good racing that we all can enjoy.
Matthew Heyman, great day in Australian history. Sad day for Belgium. I relive it every week before Roubaix. Heyman prepared on Zwift actually before Roubaix. That's a natural sponsor plug, the likes of which you'll never see. Thanks as always for listening for the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast presented by Zwift. We'll see you with the recap of Roubaix on Femmes avec Zwift on Saturday and the men's on Sunday. Until then, ciao.